in other currencies. Silver was up 1.4% on the week, not as much as gold, and it's still below $31. I think it closed around $30.60. That's the buy. I mean, you can certainly keep buying gold. It's going to go higher, I think. But if you don't want to buy at the all-time highs, which is basically where we are in gold, now the chances are these aren't going to be the all-time highs for long. And so most people who buy gold are going to be buying near the record highs because gold's going to keep rising. But again, it's not gold that's rising. It's fiat currencies that are falling, and they've got a long way to fall. So therefore, the price of gold in terms of those currencies has a long way to rise. But silver is what everybody should be buying right now, I think. I mean, it's a steal below $31. I mean, I think 30 is the support. I mean, they can get a little bit below that if we've done that, 29 and change. But I mean, this is, I think, about as good as it's going to get.
I need you to look for survivors.
The silver market. People should be buying membership gold sells silver too, and they'll be open all weekend. Go to shipgold.com and load up your shopping cart with a bunch of silver. Or talk to the reps there, but you know, the market's going to explode. I think. I mean, I think we're getting ready for it. We're talking about it. We're paying attention to it. But the fundamentals are great. Certainly, the gold stock investors are not paying attention to it. Even though the gold stocks had a good week, mind you, the GDX was up 4.4% on the week, and the GDXJ was up 4.75%. So a solid week. But if you consider where they are.
You weren't using your brain anyway.
This morning, these stocks needed to rally 18% to get back to their highs from October. That's like 3 months ago. And even with today's rally, they're still, 17, 17% rise from here.
Didn't expect to take on the apocalypse today.
Get back to where they were. When gold is the same price as it is right now. I mean, gold is in a huge bull market, obviously. We're hitting record highs in every currency. We're about to hit a record high. I'm pretty sure that we'll hit a new all-time record high next week, if not on Sunday night. So record highs in gold. That is a bull market, right? Bull markets keep making record highs. The gold stocks are all in bear market. Right? They all dropped more than 20% from their highs, and they haven't recovered. So they're still in bear markets. So you have gold at all-time highs in a huge bull market, yet you have gold mining stocks that should be the primary beneficiaries of the gold bull market, and they're all in bear market. What does that tell you? Investors have got everything wrong. Right? They're buying what they should be selling. They're selling what they should be buying. They don't understand
you get off on
this
this
rally. In fact, because the dollar has gone up over the last 3 months, even with the recent decline.
Look at that! Did
that
someone
means
sand down
these
your rough
mining
edges?
companies are even more profitable because the increase in the price of gold is bigger because the gold companies operate in Canada and they operate in Australia. Their operating profits have really gone up because their costs are in Canadian dollars, right? But their revenue is in U.S. dollars. So they're more profitable and the prices are lower. Right? So this is, I think, going to end up being the biggest bull market that we've ever seen in gold. Probably bigger than what we saw in the 70s, which is a tough act to follow if you recall the 1970s, when gold went from $35 an ounce to $800. So I'm talking about something that potentially is going to be bigger than that. But the biggest bull market in history, accompanied by the most skepticism, the most bearishness. There is no greed. Gold's at a new high, and gold stock investors are scared to buy the stocks. Right? Every time gold goes up, they think it just means it's about to get killed. And so that, I think, is a very good sign for the longevity of this market. But it also just shows you how few investors really understand what's going on here. I was looking at some of these statistics just on the U.S. market and where it is. So the S&P or U.S. stocks represent 67% of the total stocks. Think about that. For one country, we got 4% of the population, and our stock market is 67% of the value of all the stock markets. Now, that might be justified if we but our stocks are 67% of global stock market cap. That is a bubble. That doesn't make sense. Now, if you drill down into the GDP numbers, if you look at manufacturing, which I think is the most important part of GDP, because a lot of the services are a bunch of fluff and government and stuff like that, we're 16% of the world's manufacturing. Now, that's still a lot for 4% of the people, and we manufacture 16% of the stuff, but that doesn't mean our stock market should be 67% of the stock market. But even though
I'm gonna smell like blood for days.
Stuff, we only export 8% of the world's exports. That's not that much. Now we're down to 8% of global exports is America. We're 13% of global imports. That's the problem. We import 60% more than we export. That's unsustainable. That's the bubble. That's, again, and I'll get into Trump and his speeches, but that's what he doesn't understand. He thinks that the world is taking advantage of us. No, we're taking advantage of the world. They're letting us get away with this. We're importing 60% more than we export, and the way we pay for it
Sunshine's
is
the
with
best
debt.
disinfectant.
The United
So I
States,
let some into your
even
skull.
though we're 26% of world GDP, we're 37% of
Guess that
world
one was done
debt.
using his
And
body.
that's just if you count U.S. treasuries. If you count state and local debt, because most of the countries, they don't have all the states and cities borrowing as much as we do. But if you throw in the state and local debt, we're 40% of the world government debt. We're only 4% of the population. We own 40% of the debt. That is an enormous liability that the United States has without the capacity, even close, to repay that. And so, how are we financing all this debt? Again, it's the rest of the world that is making all this debt possible. It's not American savings, it's global savings. It's not American manufacturing, it's global manufacturing that is making up the gap. Yes, we do manufacture a lot in total, but not enough. Not enough to cover our standard of living, our consumption. Our economy is being propped up. But I specifically wanted to focus on the stock market. That is not going to maintain that 67%. Either the U.S. stock market has to go way down, or the rest of the world's stock markets have to go way up. And I think it's going to be a combination of the two. But what's really going to happen is an alignment of exchange rates. The dollar is going to tank. And when the dollar tanks, that all by itself readjusts the stock market percentages. Because when the dollar goes down,
Nothing like a
then
little
the value of our
upgrade to make
stock
a man
market
feel
goes
young
down
again.
relative to the rest of the world, assuming all their stocks stay the same. But
Only
the
the way I
currencies
wake up
and
in
their
the morning.
price didn't go up. And that's where I think we're headed. I mean, the world has got completely fooled on what the implications are of a Trump presidency. They don't understand the structural nature of our economic problems, and that nothing Trump is going to do is going to even begin to scratch the surface of solving them. We still have a dollar crisis coming. We still have a sovereign debt crisis coming. All that is going to happen. That is going to realign these valuations, and so people should be buying the foreign stocks, buying emerging markets. The type of stocks that I've been buying for years in anticipation of the events that are going to happen. It's taken longer for this thing to play out, and in the process, the imbalances have gotten bigger and bigger. I just think that creates an even bigger opportunity for the people that come to the party late, actually, to get an even better seat and to make an even bigger return and a faster return on their investment. Anyway, we've got a quick commercial break, so stick around. Family's future. It's time to protect .com and a licensed insurance agent will call you right away with the right policy for your life insurance and your budget. Select Quote. They shop, you save. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/ship. Go to selectquote.com/ship today to get started. That's selectquote.com/ship. Right. Before I get to the president, and there are two particular talks. He did a little speech and a Q&A over at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. They have that event every year, and so he addressed all of the Wall Street bigwigs who go out to Switzerland to ski and congratulate one another and pontificate once a year in Davos. I've never actually been to that conference. So I guess they don't invite me. I'm too much of an outsider. But in any event, so he spoke there. And he also did an interview with Sean Hannity. So I'm going to talk about some of the things that were said. But before I get to that, I want to talk about some economic statistics that came out of events. The most significant in Japan, and nobody's really talking about it. Again, this is one of these warnings that I've been talking about. Who needs a tank when you are the tank? Unnoticed, by the mainstream. So, Japan raised interest rates last night by 25 basis points. Now, that may seem, so what? That's a big deal. 25 basis points, that's nothing. Well, they doubled rates because they were at 25 basis points, and now they're 50. So rates doubled.
Windows open.
Night. But that 25 basis point hike was the biggest hike in 18 years in Japan. 18 years. So things are changing down there, and it ain't going to be pleasant what's about to happen in Japan. Now, rates have gone up, but they still have a long way to go because they also announced their inflation last night.
Even the strongest metal breaks down eventually.
And year-over-year, because I only have the year-over-year number. And consumer prices have been measured by the Japanese CPI, which I'm sure is flawed, like ours. Maybe it's not quite as bad. But according to their CPI, prices rose 3.6% last year. 3.6. Interest rates are 50 basis points. A 10-year Japanese government bond, the JGB yields 1.21, I think. Inflation is triple that yield. You have massive negative interest rates. That's not going to stay that way. Rates are going much higher. And the most ridiculous part about it is when the Bank of Japan raised interest rates, they still talk about making progress. They're almost at 4%. What are they making progress? They way past that benchmark. They're looking at zero at 2%. They may never see inflation that low again in Japan. 2%. I mean, they made it a number one policy. The reason the Japanese government has so much debt is because the Bank of Japan was committed to having 2% inflation when it was 1. They should have left well enough alone. There's nothing wrong with 2%. It's better than 0. 0 is better than 1. And negative 1 is better than 0. But of course, these Keynesian economists were able to hide behind this nonsense that the problems that Japan had that we didn't have enough inflation. That wasn't the problem. That's false logic. For instance, the Japanese economy is weak and inflation is low. Aha! It must be the low inflation that has caused the economy to be weak. No, they got it backwards. And in fact, if inflation was higher, the economy would be even weaker. The low inflation was something good in an otherwise, bad economy, right? It wasn't the problem. It was one of those bright spots. But instead, they decided that we would have a stronger economy if only prices
This
were
thing
rising
hits
fast.
half as crazy as it looks.
Asinine
I'm in for a good time.
economic strategy. Well, now they got to really pay the piper because now, in order to get inflation up, they have to run low again. And now, what happens is prices have gone up and they can't afford it.
Can't argue with science.
More than we
Sending
can,
back.
but not without major disruptions to the Japanese economy because they're going to have big increases in taxes. the
cracking
Japanese
lots
can
of eggs.
afford. They're going to have big cuts in government spending. What I think the Japanese are going to be doing is unloading over $1 trillion worth of U.S. treasury, right? When you can't afford to pay your bills, you got to sell your assets. And, you know, what's one of the most liquid, easily sellable assets that the Bank of Japan has that they can sell to pay down some of that debt that's going to be a lot more expensive to service? It's U.S. Treasuries. Japan is our biggest creditor, right? They passed China now because China hasn't been buying a lot of treasuries. So Japan is our biggest creditor. You know, Japan more than anything, and Japan's broke, right, with all this debt. They're going to be selling U.S. Treasuries, but rising interest rates are going to be a big problem for the Treasury markets. Remember, the yen carry trade has been funding all sorts of investments around the world in risk assets, including U.S. Treasuries, which are a risk asset for the Japanese, right? There's a lot of risk buying U.S. Treasuries. What if the yen goes up, right? That's a big loss there if you're in Japan and you're buying U.S. Treasuries. But they got 3.6% inflation, and they're talking like they're still trying to get 2. They don't even want to concede the fact that they're way beyond it, right? They got too much of a good thing, right? As if it was actually a good thing. We're going to have a 4 handle on Japanese inflation early, I think, in 2025. And by the end of the year, it'll be at least a 5 handle, if not more. So how are you going to have 5% inflation and 1%, 1.2% 10-year yields? And there's no way. Nobody is going to want to own these bonds. Most of these bonds are owned by the Japanese. But when they start to see this kind of inflation, they're not going to want to hold on to these Japanese government bonds. So rates are going a lot higher in Japan than people think. And that's going to put a lot of upward pressure on rates around the world, especially in the United States, at a time where the U.S. is probably going into recession. Right? And I'm going to get into some of the economic data that we got today. We got the PMI numbers for January. And even though the manufacturing number was slightly better than expected, it got to 50.1. This is the first time it's peaked its head above 50 in a long time, because 50 is kind of the line between expansion and contraction. We've been in a huge manufacturing recession, which I think is going to continue. So I don't think it's a big deal that we're above 50. I don't think we'll stay there for long. But look what happened to the service sector. It tanked. Last month, the PMI for the service sector, which is, 70+% of GDP, right? That's our bubble economy. The PMI for the service sector was at 58.5. They revised that down to 56.8. The consensus for January was 56.7, and it came in at 52.8. That's a crash. That is a massive contraction in the service sector, which is most of the GDP. So that is a warning sign. Everybody is all excited about the Trump presidency, but the economic data is suggesting that we're headed south. Recession, I think, higher inflation, weaker economy, it's going to be stagflation. And, when Donald Trump did the interview with Hannity, right, one of the things he told Hannity, and they did the interview, in the Oval Office right in front of the Resolute desk. And he told Hannity that, had he been reelected, we wouldn't have had any inflation. Which, again, if you listen to this podcast, is not true. The big increase in the monthly CPI started at the tail end of Trump's last year. And then the worst year of inflation under Biden was the first year he was president, 2021. So a lot of that was a result of policies that preceded his presidency. Inflation works with a lag. It takes some time for the money that's printed to work its way into the pricing structure. So most of the inflation that we had in 2021 was created while Trump was president. So to say that had he only been reelected, there'd be no inflation is nonsense. We would have had a lot of inflation. Now, maybe we would have had less in 2023 or 2024. We don't know. We don't know what policies he would have had. Maybe he wouldn't have had as much increases in spending, but maybe there would have been more tax cuts. I don't know what would have happened. But I that Trump handed the inflation baton to Biden. There was a big inflation problem brewing while he was president, so he got lucky to get out of Dodge. And now he gets fresh out of warning shots. Claim that all that was Biden's fault and he had nothing to do with it. And somehow he starts with a clean slate. But there's a lot of inflation that's coming, so Trump's going to have a difficult time. He'll try to blame a lot of this inflation, I suppose, on Biden. But I don't know how long that's going to work. But anyway, let me get to. I made a bunch of notes here of what Trump was talking about when he spoke to Davos. In fact, I actually don't even have the notes. As I was watching this, I kept posting on X. You know, I'm almost at 1.1 million X followers. It's taking a while. I got to 1 million not too long ago. It's taking a while to get the extra 100,000. Now, it was nice to get 1.1 up there. But I still got a ways to go. You know, Michael Saylor just hit 4 million followers. Gives you an idea, you know, of the popularity of crypto versus, you know, sound economic logic, right? He's got, you know, 4 times as many followers as I do. I remember when I had more followers, you'd be more helpful. So he's on a faster trajectory, just like Bitcoin. And I'll get to that. I'm going to talk about Bitcoin a little later. But let me get into this. Although, actually, let me take one quick break. I'm looking at the kind of core. Fitbot combines the workout planning and tracking you need to stay consistent and make progress on your fitness journey. The app made working out easier by planning my entire workout routine and adapting to my needs. Just keeps coming, doesn't it? A personal trainer. I've been able to work out more consistently while traveling. It's so easy to find a quick workout that fits my schedule and requires minimal equipment, which is perfect for when I'm on the road and don't have access to a full gym. Achieve New Year's resolutions and
here we go. You're gonna give me a gun or a swift kick in the balls?
Level up your workout. Join Fitbot today and get your personalized workout plan. Get 25% off your subscription. Or try the app free for 7 days at fitbot.me/gold. That's Fitbot, FITBOD.me/gold. You know, there was another thing I remember from the Hannity interview. I meant to mention this, that Trump said that actually helped push the dollar lower. And again, I think the currency traders are handicapping this wrong, but that's, you know, the markets. But Trump basically backed off a bit on tariff talk and said that he'd rather not have tariffs. He'd rather not impose them. Now, I've been saying all along that Trump wasn't going to have all these tariffs because paid for by Americans. They would hurt the GDP. They would exacerbate the recession that we're going to be in, or they may tip us into it, right? They would offset the tax cuts that he's working on because they're not paid for by Mexico or Canada or China. They're paid for by Americans. And so he was talking about it like we could, you know, get a freebie. The External Revenue Service, that was all a bunch of nonsense. And I think maybe he knows that, and that's why he doesn't want to impose them. Now, there are people that are like, oh, well, you know, it's just a negotiation. Like, what's he going to negotiate? Like, you know, our problems are not because we have bad trade deals. Remember, Trump is saying we're getting ripped off by China, by Mexico, and Canada. Why? We got the USMCA, the greatest trade deal ever negotiated. You remember when that was passed? He said that NAFTA was a trade deal. And then when he renegotiated, he said this is the greatest. He said it was a huge, monumental win. Like, he just bragged on about how fantastic this deal was. And now he's claiming we're getting ripped off. Well, how we got this fantastic deal? How we getting ripped off, right? I thought, you know, this was supposedly a big win. It's all a bunch of nonsense, right? There really wasn't much of a difference anyway. I said that between the USMCA and NAFTA. The biggest difference was the name. You know, but once Trump branded it, you know, with his name, it was great. When it was somebody else's, it was lousy. Just like, you know, when he was president, it was the greatest economy in the history of the world. And when Biden was president, it was the worst. Even though, you know, they were pretty much the same. I mean, yeah, maybe it was a little bit worse under Biden, but, you know, it wasn't the night and day difference that Donald Trump claims. So this is not a negotiation tactic. You know what would be a better
See that
negotiation
little tape
tactic?
pop off?
The
Don't let it
tariffs
escape.
are great. Put on the tariffs, and then use reducing them as a bargaining chip. Like, put the tariffs on right now, and say, okay, these are the tariffs. That would be a stronger position, I think, than just bluffing that we're going to put the tariffs on, because people call it bluff. Oh, it's just a negotiation tactic. I mean, how do you have a negotiation tactic? Right? If the people you're negotiating with know you're bluffing, know that the tariffs are just, you know, a gimmick to negotiate, that they don't give you any leverage. Just impose the tariffs. And if Trump was right, if it's creepy, if Americans get it for nothing, if we really could put the cost of our government on the Canadians or the Mexicans or the Chinese, why not do it? And, you know, why stop at 20%? Why not 40%? Why not 100%? Make the world pay for everything. Just get rid of the income tax and have the Chinese pay for everything, right? Have the Europeans pay for everything, right? If that's the case. Because it's not the case. It sounded great campaign. We're going to raise taxes on foreigners who can't vote, right? But when it comes down to it, he doesn't really want to do it. And I said that. I said he would be backing away from it. And so the fact that he is, I guess that's one of the reasons that the dollar is coming down. The tariffs were never good for the dollar. It's just that the markets thought they were lawful. I wanted to mention this statistic.
Hey, shit bags. How's that light on your after?
Bankruptcies are at a 14-year high. Now, how is that consistent with all this talk of a strong economy? We have a great economy, yet bankruptcies are at a 14-year high. Does that make any sense? You would assume that if the economy was really good, fewer companies would be going bankrupt. When companies are going bankrupt, it usually means that times are tough. So, most bankruptcies in 14 years contradicts that narrative, as does credit card numbers. So, the percentage of people who are making their minimum payment on their credit card, and that's like you pay 2% of the balance, right? So, you owe $10,000 and you pay $200, right? The percentage of people doing that jumped to 10.5 now. That's the highest it's been in 12 years. Now, it could be higher for longer because the survey didn't start until 12 years ago. So in the 12-year history where they've been keeping track of this is the highest percentage of people who are making the minimum payment. Now, if the economy was strong, why would you make the minimum payment? Especially interest rates at record highs. Credit card interest rates are 24%. So if you are 24% interest, that's kind of like 22%, right? You'd want to pay off that credit card debt as fast as you can to avoid that 24% interest. It's the fact that a record number of people are making this smaller payment possible tells you that that's the most they can afford. And they're stuck paying 24% on a huge balance because they don't have any money to pay it down. This would not be going on.
Nobody tell the Soviet Olympic team
economy,
about this stuff.
People would have more money and would be able to pay down the debt to avoid a 24% interest. And what do you think is going to happen next? It's going to be the default. Right now, people are making 2% payments. Pretty soon, they're not going to make any payment at all. I mean, first of all, what's the point? Why pay 2%? You're barely treading water. When you make a 2% payment, your balance doesn't really go down. You owe $10,000, and you pay 2%. When you get the next bill, it's probably the $200 you paid. So you're never going to get out of that hole. You're just storing your money away, right? So you might as well just stop making the payments. So that's going to happen. You're going to see a big surge in delinquencies in credit cards. And all of this is consistent with what I've been saying and what the voters have been saying. That is, we have a weak economy, we don't have a strong economy, and unfortunately, it is going to get weaker. Anyway, so let me get to what Trump was talking about. One of the things he said right off the bat that I noticed, he talked about the high interest rates that we have and how it's a problem. And he said that we have sky-high interest rates. Sky-high. He actually said sky-high twice. Now, interest rates have got a 4 handle on them, right? The Fed funds rate is in the 4s. Long-term treasury debt is in the fours. How is that sky high? I mean, the president doesn't know what sky high is. I mean, he's a real estate developer. I mean, he builds skyscrapers. I mean,
Walk right into it.
4% sky high. It's like
Why the fuck do you guys speak a Russian accent?
I mean, we're nowhere near the sky. If you look at where interest rates average, let's say, since the Second World War and up to 2008 financial crisis, we're lower than normal. We've got low interest rates. They're not even close to being high, let alone sky. But Trump wants lower interest rates. In fact, he claimed that he's going to contact Powell and he's going to tell him to lower rates, or he's going to argue or try to persuade him to cut rates because he thinks they're too high, right? He's just going to demand lower rates. You know, he said the same thing about oil prices, right? He says oil prices are too high, and he's demanding that OPEC lower oil prices. Well, first of all, how are they going to do that? Right? And Trump wants America to produce more oil. Well, if OPEC tries to increase production, because that'd be the only way they can lower oil prices, ramp up production. And if they do that, and they drive the price down, what's that going to do to domestic production in the United States? It's going to drop. Because we're the higher cost producer. We may have more oil than they do, but they get it out of the ground at much lower cost than we do. They're the low cost producers. And so if you want to crush the U.S. oil industry, that's how you do it. You get the Saudis to flood the market. But he wants us to drill more, but the Saudis to also pump more. That's not going to happen. Right? But he's like demanding, I demand lower oil prices. And then he also wants the Fed to lower rates. But it's the Saudis are investing all this money in the U.S. He's all excited about that. Well, where are they getting that money? From selling oil. If the oil price goes down, how are they going to invest this money? They're also one of the biggest holders of our bonds. If oil prices really went down, they'd have to sell more treasuries. You know, one of the things that Trump is trying to demand, he wants the Europeans to buy more of our oil, our natural gas, which would be great for them because it's a lot better than buying our treasuries. But what would happen to U.S. oil prices if the Europeans started buying more of our oil? You know, he lifted the export ban. It means higher oil prices. So he's talking out both sides of his mouth because if foreigners buy more of our oil, that's less oil available for America. And it's not all going to just come out of the ground. And then I mentioned the oil companies are cutting back on their capex because $78 oil ain't high enough. Remember, inflation off the cost prices have gone up, costs have gone up, oil hasn't kept pace. Right? Again, Trump claimed he was on Hannity. Again, he blamed the inflation on rising oil prices. That's not why we have inflation. Inflation caused the price.
You lost your head a long time ago. I just made it a
thing. The oil price is not the problem. The price of everything else, everything but oil, is what's gone way up. Oil is still cheap. And in terms of real money, in terms of gold, it's never been this cheap. Unless you want, throw out COVID because that was an aberration. When you had to pay to get rid of your oil. But in terms of real money, oil is cheap. When oil is cheap, it's got one way to go, and that's up. So people are going to be very surprised. Trump's going to get the opposite of what he wants.
Looks like 10 pounds of
prices,
death in a 5-pound
bag. He's going to get higher oil prices. He wants lower interest rates. He's going to get higher interest rates. Now, he also mentioned Bitcoin. People got really excited because he mentioned crypto in his speech. But he didn't mention Bitcoin. He mentioned crypto. It's not big, It's still all Bitcoin. In fact, yesterday, Trump signed a executive order to establish a group on crypto. And that got a lot of people excited. Although the odds of Trump starting a Bitcoin in the first 100 days on the betting markets collapsed. They were about 50% before the announcement. They dropped down, I think they went down to 12%, 13%, and then they bounced back to about 20% now. So obviously they he's not going to create a strategic reserve Reserve right away because he created a committee to study the potential of the strategic. And he didn't say strategic Bitcoin reserve. He said strategic stockpile of crypto assets.
I think my joints are finally starting to loosen up.
Crypto, including his own meme coins, right? Again, Michael Saylor is out there saying, "Oh, Bitcoin is this most valuable property, digital property, because it's the only property that has a fixed supply." Well, all these meme coins have a fixed supply. I mean, you set it up, you create it. Anyone with a Solano address can launch a meme coin and look at the supply. And there you go. You've got the same problem is there's an unlimited supply, an infinite supply of digital assets, unlimited supply. How is that scarce? It's nothing but pure abundance. It's not anything about Bitcoin. In fact, in that executive order, I think there were only 13 words I added, and not one of those was Bitcoin. And I'll tell you what, Trump understands.
Anyone ever tell you his face looks like the business end of a hot dog?
Like a violin, like Stradivarius. During the campaign, he got all their money, he got all their votes.
Hit the exit button.
But he doesn't believe in this crap. And I think, when he launched these tokens, I mean, he's really just making fun of it. People said, some of the crypto guys were upset that he was making a mockery of the industry. The industry makes a mockery of itself. Trump just shined a spotlight on the absurdity of it all with these meme coins. But I think what Trump is doing with this commission, right, this is what politicians do when they don't want to do anything. Think about, reparations. All these African American groups all around, they want reparations. Of course, the idea is it's not going to happen.
It's like a symphony
But
of
the
bodily
politicians
harm.
didn't want to tell these voters, even the Democrat politicians, that they can't have the reparations. So what do? They set up committees, right, to study reparations so they can pretend they're doing something, even though there's nothing to study because the very concept is absurd. So you don't have to waste any money studying it. Right? But that's what Trump is doing. He sets up a committee to study the potential of a Bitcoin reserve. They waste money because it's not going to happen. But that's all they need to keep the hype alive, to keep the potential, to prop up the market. They just need to have this committee that's constantly studying, maybe having a reserve, so that they can use that to keep the market propped up, because people are going to want to buy it because they want to front run this reserve, which is going to run the price to the moon. But this is politics. It's not going to happen. It would be big negative for the country, right? Because what would happen if the government had to spend money buying nothing, buying Bitcoin? Who would that help? The people who sell their Bitcoin to the government. Everybody else would be hurt. What would the people do who get Bitcoin and sell it to the government? They go out and buy stuff. They spend it. So you have a increase in spending, but they didn't produce it.
Extra window missed. Revise when it reopens.
And so the money supply expands. More money is put into the pockets of the Bitcoin sellers who now go and spend it. It's all inflationary. You're driving up prices. Plus, you're diverting more resources that we need into creating things that we don't need, like these meme coins or whatever it is, at the expense of legitimate investment. So there's nothing but negatives from this Bitcoin reserve. And I don't think Trump is going to do it, but he does, want to string along his donors, his supporters. He just doesn't want to totally, rug pull it. So he set up this commission, and who knows how long they're going to be studying it. Although some of the things they're studying are rules and regulations and stuff like that. I think they put that reserve language in there just to appease them. It ain't going to happen. And again, I think one of the things Trump's going to hide behind is the Congress is going to prove it. People think that he's going to do it by executive order. He can't. He can't appropriate money to buy Bitcoin on his own volition, right? Those spending decisions have to be made by Congress. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve is an act of Congress. The president signed it, but both houses of Congress passed it. They'd have to do the same thing for a Bitcoin reserve. And so Trump can say, well, I'm waiting for Congress to pass it, and there's nobody that supports it. You got the senator who introduced it, and that's it. There's not a single co-sponsor of that ridiculous bill. yet they want to pretend that it's got a prayer of being passed. It doesn't have a snowball's chance in hell of being passed, and that's a good thing. But you know, again, they just want to keep hope alive. Another thing that Trump said during the Davos speech, he said that during his first term, the U.S. had by far, right? This is an exact quote, by far, the most productive economy in our history. So he didn't just say we had the most productive; it was by a long shot, and it wasn't even close to being the most productive economy we've ever had. Right? I mean, the most productive, the greatest increase in living standards was in the real golden age, or the Gilded Age, right? The Industrial Revolution.
Fucking crap.
1870, 1910, before we had the Federal Reserve, when we were on a gold standard. Yeah, we ran on tariffs, but we weren't strong because we ran on tariffs. We were strong because the economy was so small that we could afford to pay for it with tariffs. We're not even close to that. You know, the trade deficits went up every year Trump was president. If we were so productive, they would have gone down. Right? The opposite word in productive is produce. So we should have produced more if we were by far the most productive, not relied more on the productivity of the rest of the world, right, which was supposedly not as productive as we were, yet they had the surpluses that we needed to survive. Anyway, Trump also again talked about that the trade relationship between the U.S. and China is unfair, and that they're ripping us off. Well, he's right, it is unfair, but he's got the who's ripping who off backwards.
Not
It's
gonna lie,
unfair to the
I
Chinese.
can go another round on that.
They're getting ripped off. We're getting their stuff. We're getting our paper. We get goods that make our lives better. They get inflation that makes their stuff more expensive. We are on a ride on a global freight train. That is now long-term. This is damaging the economy. You know, we have structural problems in this country. They're not going to be fixed by tax cuts. They're actually going to be exacerbated. The tax cuts that Trump was talking about will increase consumption because we're going to remove taxes on Social Security, taxes on taxes, taxes on crime. Where's that money going to go? Is it going to go into investment? No, it's going to be spent on consumption, on imports, run up the trade deficit. It's all inflationary. We need less of that. We need more savings and more investment. We need less consumption. And the type of tax cuts that we're going to get are not going to cause that to happen. It's going to exacerbate the problems, and we're not going to get the tariffs, so we're not going to be taxing consumption to offset some of the tax cuts on income. So it's just bigger deficits and more inflation, and you know, the world is going to have to step up and absorb an even bigger burden. Now, I don't think they are going to do it. That is the irony of what's going to happen. Trump's going to get his wish. In the long run, it's a good thing, but in the short run, it's going to be very problematic when the dollar tanks and we can't afford the imports and we don't have the ability to manufacture ourselves. I mean, that's the whole, people talk about we need protectionism. These trade, the tariffs will protect us. That's if we have the capacity, which we don't. If we're importing 80-90% of a particular product and we just impose tariffs on that product, what are we going to do? There is no domestic way to make up the supply. We don't have the infrastructure. We don't have the factories. We don't have the supply chains. We don't have the work. So we can't do it. So either we do without it or we pay more. And we end up with a combination. Some people do without it and other people pay more. We're going to have an eventually anyway. I think what we're doing is going to accelerate a trend that is already doing my part and can easily blow up on Trump's watch. Now, one of the crazy things that Trump said is he wants the rest of the world to increase their military spending and spend 5% of the GDP on the military. Now, remember, a lot of the rest of the world is in debt too. I mean, Europe has got a lot of debt, and Trump wants Europe to spend more on defense. They got to spend less. Everybody's got to spend less, including us. For Trump to say that the world needs to spend 5% of its GDP on defense, America doesn't even do that. We spend 3.5%, which is still too much. Now, I believe that national defense should be pretty much the only thing the federal government does. It should be 80% of the budget. It's not. It's 60% or something like that. Because the government spends money on all kinds of things that we shouldn't do. That's why we can't get by on tariffs. That's why we need all these income taxes. But we need to cut defense. Obviously, Trump doesn't want to cut defense. If he wants the rest of the world to really ramp up their own defense spending, he's probably going to ramp up more.
He need to shut down that big
5%
offer.
is the number that he thinks should be spent, and we're nowhere close to 5%. But I would like to see Trump trying to encourage the world to spend less money, not more money, especially when we have so much government debt that needs to be repaid. You know, where are the government's going to get the money to increase their military spending? They're obviously going to borrow it to inflate it, right? So you're going to have more inflation. You know, when Trump said that he was going to demand interest rates to go down, I think that was another factor paying the dollar. He's going to demand that Powell lower interest rates. I don't know what Powell's going to do. Now, Powell's going to be raising interest rates, and I think he's not going to do that. You know, Trump would go ballistic if he hiked rates. And he's probably not going to cut rates at the next meeting, but at the meeting after that, I think the probability of jobs remain is 70%. So I think we're going to get a cut, let's say, in March, even though we should be getting a hike. But remember, Powell's term is up in a year, and Donald Trump can replace him with somebody that is confident is going to cut rates, because that's what Trump really wants. Unfortunately, he wants to blow a bigger bubble, because solving the problem is not anything that you can consider. Because again, solving the problems means things there's no way.
Thanks for coming to Bodies by Weaver.
Where we are,
Come again.
we need to be. We can't restructure the economy unless we restructure, because the problem is restructuring. Unless we fix that, they just get bigger. But you can't fix it without a recession. That's the trade-off, right? No pain, no gain. But it is, constructive pain. It's the type of pain that they went through in Argentina. But again, they were willing to do it because, they were used to bad times. So what the hell, right? They were fed up. Yes, we'll take the bitter taste of the medicine. We're so sick. We'll swallow it. We'll gag it down, whatever. But Americans don't want that, and Trump didn't promise that. Trump said, America's new golden age begins now. Everything is going to boom. Everyone's going to be immediately better off. The only way that Trump can fulfill that promise is just to make the bubble bigger. So the only prosperity he can deliver with that formula is false prosperity. The question is, can we do it? Right? Is there still enough room left to blow an even bigger bubble so that we can continue this false prosperity, which again doesn't lift all boats, right? We had the false prosperity under Biden, and look at what happened to the conservatives. That's why Trump was elected. So even if we have more false prosperity, it's going to be concentrated in fewer people as more experience the negative consequences of it. Apart from Trump's policy, I was listening to Jamie Dimon, people talking over in Davos. And, he came out and supported tariffs. Now, I know Jamie Dimon doesn't really like tariffs, so he had to figure out a way to support it. And he said, well, it's a national security thing, and so it's okay, even if it means a little bit higher inflation, deal with it, which is easy for him to say because he's rich enough that inflation doesn't bother him. In fact, it helps him because it helps the financial markets. But the tariffs aren't about national security. Right? I mean, our national security is in jeopardy because of the consumer goods that we're importing from the rest of the world. Now, the problem is that we're running up the debt. It's the debt that's a security issue. The trade deficit, the budget deficit, but the tariffs aren't going to solve that. Right? But I think when you get a guy like Jamie Dimon, all the business leaders are sucking up to Trump. Right? They don't want to get on the bad side. that in the last, that was the time the big critics of Bitcoin. And we wanted to ask about Bitcoin. No, I refuse to answer any questions about Bitcoin now. Why? Because he doesn't want to criticize it now that the president is behind him. So he's afraid to speak up, and he just wants to keep quiet about it. But you know, you got a lot of Wall Street people who are talking Bitcoin because they're making a fortune off of Bitcoin, and the people that are dumb enough to buy it. So that's why they keep on hyping it up, because they're generating all these fees. And think about all these companies that are selling convertible debt, that are selling stock, like MicroStrategy. The companies are charging a lot of money, right? Every time MicroStrategy does these at-the-market stock buys, Wall Street is making a fortune in commissions. And when they underwrite those, Wall Street is making a fortune. And now that you've got companies that are following this high type of idiocy down the primrose path, it's just more money in Wall Street's pocket. So they don't care, right? They're just trying to make a buck, and if they have to encourage a bigger bubble in order to line their own pockets, that's what they're doing.
Here's to finding more efficient ways
now because of the prospect of the government getting involved and using taxpayer money against it. Because the ultimate irony of Bitcoin is it was supposed to be independent of government, and now it's completely dependent. The entire Bitcoin story now, the only way it keeps going up is if the U.S. government buys it. And if the U.S. government doesn't buy it, the whole house of cards comes crashing down. Anyway, that's it for today's podcast. Again, if you liked it, don't forget to give me the thumbs up, leave a comment on it.
Bodies by weavers. How about that?
Actions that she's taking right now is she's playing the game. 100% playing the game. She's out here full out the game. Okay, all right.
Sorry, let's go here and see the
Imagine I filmed me and Desi just for our own edifications, for our own children. She consented to that film. Okay? Her and I break it off, and we stop talking, and I send that shit to you. Are you okay with that? I mean, it wouldn't be go anywhere if you sent it to me. But well, I'm just saying that alone ain't okay in my opinion. And then if you were to share it, would you share it with the internet? No, because it would get me in trouble. Right, of course not. So
this conflict just officially
the person that did share this, Destiny should have never risked it. Destiny should have never risked it. Here's my thing. I hate the pearl clutching that comes with this conversation. And people are giving me I'm not clutching my results. How would you ever say that? What? This girl is so innocent. She's out here, right? Because some people actually go out there. It's very common. And it's the worst thing ever. Your dude's got leaks pretty fucking bad. Right? It didn't affect me at all. Okay, well, listen. Yeah, but let's take Destiny. Take Destiny out of here. Make it super right? Would she be with all this moving forward? Possibly not. Because the difference is, if it was some random other dude doing it, it wouldn't go viral. It wouldn't be seen by only 5. Right? But because it's Destiny, and it's Destiny's leaks, and Destiny is also in the footage, it's gonna go viral, and her life is ruined. But I would say there's a very real chance she would file fucking charges if it was just some asshole. But you guys understand, Destiny had porn leaks on his own. Like he's like blowing Nick Boyd's ass over there or some shit like that. I think I've seen that.
fucking painless. Not that I give a shit about them.
Like, why can't you understand that this woman's most intimate, private fucking moments have shit?
I don't feel like she has the victim mentality. I don't feel like she's out here.
I think she's looking at those bitches. She's about to shut the fuck down. And the reason, okay, here's the thing. The reason you have to hit him when it hurts, and you have to
Dr.
understand that
Mobius
obviously when somebody
joined the physics team last year.
is,
Nice enough
if
guy.
it's just $10,000 to do this, he'll keep doing it. You gotta hit this motherfucker where it hurts. You need to get millions.
I can't believe we're even he fucking regrets it. I can't believe we're just like chatting. What's happening anyhow?
If you file in police case, that's it.
I'm sure as shit doing my part. Sentry turrets live. Everything in life is a marathon.
Bro, if I need to go on this, I'm taking like 20 other streamers with me, okay? So this works twofold, in my opinion. Number one is him trying to tell other streamers to shut the fuck up. I also think it's him saying it's a whole den of depravity over there. That's what I'm okay, so I don't know if this is the document or not.
All aboard, Beaver's Death
Linked in the
Express.
chat. In an interview. Here we go. Who wants to read this one?
Everybody's like the chat and shit like that. I understand.
Distraction bird in your ale.
Take on it.
Limited
I
time
think it's
offer.
probably jaded by like my overall view of the internet. Like you gotta look at what's happening on the internet to this day. We just had like a TikTok or Instagram star fuck like 1,000 dudes in like a 12-hour period or some shit. Like,
As crazy as I feel. This should work.
And then another was like, well, fuck that. I'm gonna do it, but I'm gonna do it with anal. You know, to try to beat her record. And it's like, there's so many OnlyFans, the OnlyFans culture that we live in, and I understand that every person is different, right? Some people are more sensitive to subjects than others, right? Girls that do OnlyFans know what they're doing, right?
This ain't an OnlyFans.
Right, but she knew that was Destiny. And she knew Destiny's always been this kind of controversial dude. And even though she claims that she's like, oh, I didn't ever see him doing this. Yeah, and later on in the same letter you say, well, I know he's probably done it to multiple women, and I won't be the last. Like, again, I sympathize with
shocking revelation, fuck
Don't
faces.
worry,
I
kids.
don't hate you about your opinion. I just disagree with you.
I mean, but like, as dudes, and I'm not trying to do anything, I'm talking in general, as dudes, how many times have you guys, talk in the chat with this one as well, just like, hey, here's my former girlfriend, or here's this. It's happened to me before. I've had other friends
Suspending
come up to
expo
me,
for now,
like
Alpha.
at
You're on
parties
your
or
own.
like barbecues and stuff, and like, you know, I broke up with that bitch Cindy. Yeah, she was a freak. Look at this right here.
All right,
That
guys.
would be a crime.
Guys, now that this story is almost done, we will let you bother us. So the text-to-speech is now for $20.
I'm gonna need to read. Can you click on it? Basically, what I was having with her, this is Peach. Basically, what I was having with her,
It's like a symphony of bodily harm.
one part is just going to use as an argument without anyone saying that I leaked our video. Because she has sent me super fucking damning shit that I didn't release because of her videos. Yes, it's kind of ugly, but
You know who this is, by the way?
I don't want to look good.
Go ahead.
I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of icky, I thought, so when I found out too, but I'm so biased, honestly, that I choose to ignore it. It's fine. Next audio, yeah. I
Weaver
know,
requesting
right?
Hellstorm strike.
This first, second, third, talk about this stuff. Like, you know, it is. I know. Fucking shit this girl's talking about.
I didn't get back.
That was March of last year, by the way.
Video games. I didn't get back.
Heads. You lose.
I want to say this. If he secretly recorded these girls, I reverse my opinion. If they knowingly sat around and like, yeah, fuck me daddy, videotape me, fuck me daddy, that's where I'm at. If he's like, got like a teddy bear with a camera in his eye, submit all this shit.
I mean, it don't take much to.
You need to cancel the fuck out.
It don't take much to record somebody else's
They're claiming they were secretly recorded. At least one of them is.
One of them is. Pixie didn't claim she was secretly recorded in her like.
To all the people claiming that I only cared about personal profit and that Destiny tried to make things right, here's some DMs between Destiny and a close friend of his. Destiny knew about the DMs and has never got back to me. Yeah. It is that I don't think if Steven faces consequences, he will change, and he will do this again. If he wants, he can donate the money to some charity organization.
Gumballs, sodas. How long before the cigarettes?
And the strongest one. Go ahead. Mr. 77 Super Chatted. Thank you for your call about the Edison Ray stuff. I think it will also be mentioned still. I just that's correct.
I do not know about that.
Sorry. No group discount.
And then even another. So yeah, Sneeko called Destiny. Did he?
I got a question. What are some of the dudes that are going to be outed by this?
Like Sean,
not good love.
No, that's just another lawsuit.
So he said, I've always felt that's what that was. Oh, that's Fantano, yeah. I hate
TACOM, deploy chopper gunner on my location.
What, motherfucker?
Yo, I want to know, do you guys agree or disagree with Wings? Wings W or Wings L?
I don't think you're wise. Because I don't think my takes are wide. I think I'm going to get at least 40%. I think I'm going to be on the losing end of it. I think it's more of a Wings L. But what I did think I knew it was going to be a Wings L. Mainly because like it's such an outlandish take that to be like, why would you victim blame? Which I'm not victim blaming. I just think the victim is not being sincere.
Like, I don't hate it. My mind
I'll wait for the show.
My mind goes to a woman, and I've known a lot of women this shit's happened to, and like you may say, it doesn't, they're pussies or whatever, it fucks them up real bad when their employer is the same pussies. Or whatever you said, sex act.
If you need to tap out, Exfil Hill is ready to go.
Well, I'm speaking hyperbolically, but it's disturbing that your father sees you in a sex act. You would never want that. Alright, so guys, we covered this story on Locale Live as well. Tectone, or whatever his name, was accused of SA by his girlfriend, Pikachu, or whatever the fuck her name is. Her story was something along the lines that he was just treated her like a
Frank said that thinning a herd is good for the planet. Can't argue with science.
Okay, so if you're confused, you're going to say, is going to hear this. And I mean this genuinely. I fixed it. I was there for you like nobody else was there for you. In your home. Your words, not mine. The fact that you're letting these people get into your ear, people, the same people who are talking about that activity, the same people complaining. Or I cannot talk about them. I know they're talking to you right now, Mark. Letting them get in your head.
Exfil for a re-tap. Go advise.
Saying, I knew it was going to be like just because people are vocal doesn't mean like some people can see through this, and I time, like, oral sex or something, that's what my wife would do, right? It's always her body, her consent. I don't understand where guys get to this point where it's
Now there's literally nothing happening between you.
right? Like, it's still one of those things you gotta work.
Carver owes me a beer when this is over.
So I just asked Gino to see if it was worth going into. He said, Gino said yes.
So, I love this shit, dude. This is what got live. Yeah, if you want to, let's do it.
But so there's a new accusation I don't know.
Holy.
Yeah, this is big bitch.
Apparently there is an allegation that she
Make that picture kid. She is scared for her life. She is keeping a good face. She knows this motherfucker's right here. The table on the side with all the donuts and coffee, that's been cleared out for like an hour.
guys, I've been trying to give her Lynn's boyfriend's ex-girlfriend. Okay?
Right.
So I'm trying to explain this, but no, leave this on
When you get pointed out by fat motherfuckers, that's when you know you're fat, dog. That's when you need to see Dr. Now. Right now. Like, good lord.
Lynn Reed or whatever her name is. Her new girlfriend. Allegedly the leader. This is the new trans boyfriend line. And that first one we just looked at is he's that she has linked up with the leader. Here's an explanation of what's going on.
Try and undead yourself from that, you shit fucker.
Just this April, Tommy's over 1,000 pound girl.
Already one
kill.
That's such a brutal way to say it.
It's true though. It's true.
One
I dated a feeder back in the early 2000s, and that bitch wanted to kill me.
Wait, lift your gun and that hard woody will be on full display. She looks like her daddy.
You know, it's fucking, and when the people at Zaxby's are like, dude, don't do this.
Alright, let's go back.
Died
of corpses.
Okay. Alright, so wow.
Weaver requesting chopper gunner above.
Tommy was caught following Peter accounts.
My first thought with Tommy's was you get steps. Step part 2, you gotta have a hell of breath control. Like if you're a beater, you gotta do sexual orientation. You gotta be able to hold your breath and have like a snorkel mask and like a ground bat. Like
I know what you're saying. What the fuck? God damn, Jordan.
Like how does that happen, dog?
I don't know, dude. I don't know. I don't know things.
There's so many rumors being.
I love the fact she puts makeup on and fake lashes like that outdoes the fact that she's like the 6th